So we come now to the final section of the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 22 through 28, and that ends the Gospel of Matthew. Now we ended last time with chapter 21, which is the triumphal entry. This is what we celebrate on Palm Sunday, and this is the beginning of Holy Week, so this would have taken place on Sunday. Jesus enters the city, he cleanses the temple, and he begins to teach in the temple, and he tells a number of parables, and he will also get asked a number of questions by the scribes and Pharisees. So you go to we start in chapter 22, and there's this wonderful question to Jesus, a difficult question to him about should we pay taxes to Caesar or not, and Jesus has this remarkable answer. He says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. And the religious leaders marvel that he could come up with that answer. There's a question about the resurrection. So this is asked by the Sadducees, and they were a religious group that did not believe in the prophets, but only the writings of Moses, first 5 books of the Bible. So what's great about this is that Jesus answers them to prove the existence of the resurrection. Not from the prophets that they didn't believe in, but he answers them from the law of Moses. So you also have the Great Commandment and whose son is Christ. Chapter 23 is a whole chapter about the scribes and Pharisees, and Jesus is very critical of their practices. Now this turns out to be really important for the early church because many thought that the scribes and Pharisees were a model religious group. They were very strict. They were people who wanted to go the extra mile to serve God, but they had become very legalistic. They had all of these things, these customs and rituals that they did, and Jesus' complaint about them and to them is that they had made those rituals and laws into commandments and statutes, but they missed the real purpose of the law, which was to develop faith and kindness and mercy and compassion toward others. So this section is very important because the church at that time really wondered, is this the model for Christian faith, for a life of faith? And Jesus is saying to them, no, this is not the model. A true life of faith is going to be something very different. So chapter 24, also very important. The temple that Herod had rebuilt was magnificent. The disciples comment on the great stones, and Jesus says, yeah, but there's coming a time very soon when this is all going to be torn down. So we have a long section by Jesus about the end of the age. Lots of things in here that we don't completely understand. I think it's fair to say they're hidden from us until that time comes, and but they remind us to be watchful and to be not to be found when Christ should return doing bad things or mistreating our fellow human beings. Chapter 25, parable of the some different parables, parable of the talents, and then at the end of that, a very important parable beginning at chapter 31 about service to others. Jesus says, if I was a stranger and you did nothing for me. I was in prison, you didn't visit me. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. And so here's a parable that gives to us the imperative of compassion. We cannot turn our hearts away from those in need. Chapter 26 begins the account of the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. A couple of things about these two chapters. Matthew has some things in it that are not found in other Gospels. For example, Matthew records that Jesus withdraws and prays, "Let this cup pass from me." He also records the suicide of Judas. That's unique to Matthew. He is the gospel that tells us about Pilate's wife's dream, which is very interesting, and also how Pilate washes his hands to try to proclaim his innocence and put the guilt of Christ's death on the crowd. Matthew notes that there was an earthquake at the time of Jesus' death, and that some of those who had been dead rose from the dead and appeared to some in Jerusalem after Christ's resurrection. And Matthew also is the gospel that tells us that a guard was posted at the tomb, and that they would have, and that turns out to be very important because they would have been there to give witness to the resurrection. And in chapter 28, we have the resurrection of Jesus. And Matthew 28 ends with what we've come to call the Great Commission, which is this very clear statement about our purpose as the church. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all I have commanded you, and behold, I'm with you to the end of the age. That's the commission of the church. It's called the Great Commission, and at the very end of Matthew. So I hope you have enjoyed Matthew. It's a wonderful gospel. It's got so many things in it that tell us about the life and ministry and teachings of Jesus. So we've now finished the Gospel of Matthew. Again, read slowly and reflectively, and trust that God will speak to you through it.